I know no one really talks about it anymore because
there's 400 food trucks in Western New York.
Right, we take for granted that we have this
there's
food
a whole
truck.
day dedicated.
We have this culture
15
here
weeks of the year.
But there was a very much the sky is falling mentality, and no one was really being reasonable or rational or logical. And all I kept saying was, "Hey, I'm not asking us to do anything different here."
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whenever you may be listening, and welcome to Latitude, the 43 North podcast. I'm your host, Nate Benson, Digital Media Manager. No, scratch that. Director of Media and Public Relations at 43 North. I've got this new title, and one day I'm going to get it right. But anyway, thank you so much for listening to the Latitude podcast. It's episode 61. 61 episodes of this podcast. I can't believe we've gone this far. Thank you so much for listening. And if you're a new listener, perhaps you're a new listener because of our guest today, Pete Cimino from Lloyd Taco Factory, Churn, and all things tacos in Western New York. Thank you so much for joining us, and make sure you subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcasting app so you don't miss out on any future episodes of our show. Thank you so much again for listening. So let's not waste any time with me and my intro and jump into this week's conversation with Pete Cimino. We talk about Lloyd. Who is Lloyd? Where is Lloyd? Actually, full disclosure, we don't talk about Lloyd at all. We talk about the taco truck and the taco factory and ice cream and changing laws in Western New York and bucking the system and, all things that, Pete has done while building a taco empire in Buffalo. So let's not waste another minute with me and jump right into this week's episode with Pete Cimino. Pete, how you doing today?
Wow, it's really just like that.
We jump right in. No nonsense. No, I record the intros prior, so I don't want to waste the time with the intros with you. I want to get right into the conversation. How you doing today?
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's certainly being on the spot.
Give us the quick pitch of Pete Cimino.
I don't even know how to do that. Quick is probably not the best word there. You want to know history?
Give us a quick background of who you are, what you do.
Oh, and, okay, sure.
The who, what, when, so to speak.
So not the full dossier.
We'll get into the dossier is like question 4 or 5, so don't worry.
Cool. Yeah, I'm Pete Cimino, co-founder of Lloyd Taco Trucks, and now Taco Factories, tortillas, and Churn ice cream and coffee.
Coffee now.
Yeah.
A little bit of everything.
A little bit of everything.
And just to clear up the long-standing Buffalo debate, Lloyd's or Lloyd?
Oh,
it's
perfect.
Lloyd, right?
Perfect.
Just to segue right into the controversy.
It is. It's singular, and we like to joke about that in house.
Yeah,
we do it pretty frequently, and it's funny because we'll see people on social. They'll kind of like go to bat for us. Yeah, be like, no, it's Lloyd.
Guys, just Lloyd. That's the dedicated customer base when they can correctly say your name. Not
that it matters, but I just
Yeah.
In terms of being on brand.
Right. And as I know you're close with Nick Brown from The Helm, brand is obviously key. So prior to Lloyd, what were you doing?
So prior to Lloyd, I was kind of trying to make my way through the life of a high school math teacher. And while I was teaching, I had always been experimenting. Tried to start some other businesses. I did. I say try because most of them were failures. Some were profitable and some were great, painful learning lessons. So that was kind of it. Like right out of college, I was already right into a job, and before I got out of school, it was always going to be like, how do I not teach? So
at school
and you going in, it's not. Yeah, and I mean I'm a terrible employee. I tell everybody this. It's not for me.
So that's why you had to be the boss, right?
Right. Definitely have a problem with authority. Always questioning stuff. But yeah, that was life before my profession.
So it was a pretty easy decision for you then when the opportunity for Lloyd came about to just drop the teaching gig and just dedicate time to that, right?
Yeah. I mean, you know what? It wasn't easy in the sense that everyone thought I was crazy. Yeah. But I had been up against that in the past. And the truth of the matter is I basically had to resign from teaching. And I knew that this was coming ahead of it. So I had a few months to kind of like get my stuff together. It was around Thanksgiving time. Quick story, I didn't need my master's to teach. I was one of the last classes that wasn't a requirement. So they gave you a 5-year window. I pushed that window as hard as I could. I applied for an extension. I got it. I'll procrastinate. I'll leave stuff, to the last minute. And the second time I didn't get it, and I knew that it was coming.
Yeah, you knew, going back to get your master's, like it was a waste of time.
No, it wasn't.
Your heart wasn't in teaching. You just wanted.
No, I had tried a couple classes. I mean, teaching's great. I don't have any qualms about it. It allowed me to do all those other things outside of it and still act like a kid, basically. So,
what was it about, teaching that you initially were interested in? Obviously, lost the interest in it. For a lot of people, that's a dream career. It's tenured. You never get fired.
Yeah.
You can retire.
That's why I said
fat and happy.
It was really crazy when I was. I could have easily just gone and finished the degree, and preserve my tenure and all that. But I think I went back to the original decision about being a teacher, and I realized that I didn't make that decision for myself. And when you're in high school, there's really no one there mentoring you in a way that I think is necessary, because you're making these life decisions, and a lot of which involve a serious debt burden or whatnot. And so, like, when I go to talk to high schools or whatever, I give them a different side of the story, the one that their teachers won't, even if they hate me for it, because I want to provide that other perspective. Yeah. So, again, I didn't really make the decision for myself. It was just a function of my environment and doing what I thought I was supposed to do, or the right thing to do. And so I hope.
So what year are we talking about here, just so the audience understands the timeline of everything?
So, like, junior, senior year, when you decide like where you're gonna go. And I mean, I only applied to a couple schools. I only applied to like Canisius and Niagara, and I think my backup plan was UB, and I went with Canisius because they gave me the best scholarship.
Sure.
Like, it wasn't anything I was super thinking through in a way that was looking more than like the next few months out.
And you figured out, what was the time frame from when you decided, you're going to give up the teaching gig and dedicate your life to Lloyd?
Oh, that was pretty much November of 2009, because in February 2010 I had to walk away. Mm-hmm. So somewhere between November and December, I went back to my old notebook. I kept a sketch list of ideas, and I thought about this idea for a ridiculous, I called it a food van at this point, and it was really around the idea of poutine and burgers, mostly burgers, and then that evolved into a taco truck. Luckily, because a month later I was out to dinner with Nick and another friend of mine, and Nick was like, you got to check out this company, Kogi, and they're on the West Coast. And that night I did, and I kind of fell in love. And
then Kogi's kind of
the godfather,
of
the godfather of the modern food truck movement. Yeah. Chef Roy Choi is the person that legitimized street food in the way that we think of it today, in terms of a gourmet offering from a truck. Before that, it was very Roach Coach driven, and he was the first person that was garnering attention, and soon the Food Network and others fell in love and realized that there was a movement here. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, this guy's badass, and it just, I don't know, real urban, kind of the vibe was very similar to myself. And
it's shocking to a lot of people, but my wild teenage years was a punk rock or hardcore kid, so I kind of equate the food truck movement to that kind of punk rock DIY, do it yourself, like just see what happens and find out what works.
Yeah,
was that kind of the case for you?
Yeah, man, I'm into anything that's going against the grain. I think if you're doing what everyone else is doing, you're going to get what everyone else has got, and I certainly wanted something different for my life. So I just, like I said, I'm either going to look like a fool, or it'll be decent.
So summer 2010, first truck rolls off off the parking lot.
So between that dinner at December, it took me a few months to find a partner. My original partners basically told me to go to hell, and luckily Chris, after some serious arm twisting, was on board. That was like February, and once we started doing the research and finally got a meeting with Buffalo Place, I want to say in March, it wasn't until July that we got that permit. So like March, we're all in, we're going to the bank, we're July, so I had to sit and figure out a way to fend for myself during that time, living off of savings and trying to sell stuff on eBay and whatever.
It's funny. My wife and I lived over on Norwood Ave at the time, Elmwood Village, and we were moving out of that area in August-ish. You know, we bought a house in Kenmore. We had just gotten married, and I remember walking at Bidwell, but it wasn't like the Elmwood part of Bidwell. It was like further down by Richmond, Bidwell. And I saw your truck, and I'm like, what the hell? What is this thing? Like you were open but weren't, but like it was kind of like super secret. I remember like what? So I got to talk. I'm like, holy hell, this is fantastic. I need this more in my life. And I'm sure you hear that a lot of people didn't know what this was those first few months, right?
Yeah, they didn't know what it was for a lot of reasons. First of all, the food that we were serving was basically like
not buffalo food.
No, it was alien food, really. I mean, people looked at me like I grew a second head when I was trying to explain, what carnitas was, and no one was eating anything on a corn tortilla. That was part of the reason, but the bigger reason really was we had no access.
Yeah.
So that shift that you talked about on Elmwood was one of a few where we just tried to like go out and test the waters and sneak, because the rules as they sat on the books were very ambiguous. They were written, in the vein of hot dog carts in the 1920s and 30s, and they really hadn't been updated. So no one knew what we could or couldn't be doing, and we soon found ourselves being shut down every 3 or 4 shifts when we weren't stationed at Buffalo Place downtown.
So tell me about that first day or first week of getting the truck out there and getting it in front of the public. What was that like?
It was I felt like I got kicked in the teeth in a good way. We opened on a Wednesday, and it was kind of like just, hey, it's going to be a soft opening, and it wasn't really soft by any means. There was probably a good 50 people there, and I was really excited to see that this could turn into something. But it wasn't until 2 days later on Friday that I knew that we had stumbled on something potentially great.
Was that just because the line was around the block?
The line was around the block. I mean, first day it's like, okay, well, maybe people just came out for fun.
Test it out.
But when I saw repeat faces on that third day, and I tell everyone that the truck looked like a war zone. I mean, there was just cabbage everywhere. Everywhere. I just sat on the floor and was just like, man, I need something cold to drink right now. And my roommate at the time, because Chris wasn't on the truck in the beginning. He was pulling double duty at Wegmans as the bakery manager. And he'd come help me prep at night. So I had to grab my roommate, my brother's friends, anyone I could, just random kids from Canisius, hey, come help me out. And my roommate was like, dude, you have no idea what you just did.
Yeah. So kind of on that same tone, did you fundamentally set out to destroy all brick and mortar restaurants, as some of the critics said, or was that just a happy accident?
Yeah, right. No, my intent was never to do that. I'm a firm believer in competition.
But man, some of those brick and mortars were pissed.
Yeah, and I don't, I know no one really talks about it anymore because
there's 400 food trucks in Western New York.
Right, we take for granted that we have this
there's
food
a whole
truck.
day dedicated.
We have this culture
15
here now.
weeks of the year.
But there was a very much the sky is falling mentality, and no one was really being reasonable or rational or logical. And all I kept saying was, hey, I'm not asking us to do anything different here. Look at the other cities. Let's borrow a model that works. And fine, if you don't think Buffalo's LA, I agree with you, but let's look at Cleveland, And luckily, 9 months prior, they had already gone through the same thing.
Yeah.
So I started connecting one of our councilmen to one of their councilmen, trying to do whatever I could to push it.
Was all that legal back and forth? You just started your own business, and now you're, in newspaper headlines, news clips on the 5 o'clock news, doing forums about, with municipalities about food trucks. Was all that legal back and forth in those early years, tough on you as an entrepreneur? Because you just wanted to open up a food truck and make good food, not buck the system, right?
Yeah, I think tough is putting it lightly. But before I get into that, I want to make something clear that these people who were opposed to us were not your traditional restaurant owner. These were people, they were like the fast food Gestapo of Buffalo. I mean, And rightfully so, they were trying to protect their territory because they thought that we were going to be stealing business from them, not realizing that there would be a synergy on these streets and potentially driving more traffic. So there's that.
Yeah.
What was the other question?
How tough was this on you?
Yeah,
dealing with it. 'Cause
yeah.
Like I said, you just wanted to make tacos. You didn't want to be going to council meetings every
Tough's
week.
the wrong word. I mean, I think it made us really fight for what we wanted and what we believed in. And I think, maybe it's a blessing, but it fueled the fire in a way that I couldn't have myself. I mean, any attention is good attention, and all they did was create more for me.
Yeah. I mean, when you're in the news every night, it's like, oh, thanks for the free publicity.
Literally, yeah. And I was trying to educate people on trucks as it is, but that's a one-on-one thing. I'm doing that on a daily basis on the truck as I'm meeting people. But when you blast that out on the news and when you're writing articles, it was really awesome. But truthfully, there were times when I was like, man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pay my electric bill, because that first year was terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible. Like, we didn't know, again, where we were going to open or not be open or shut down or not be shut down. So there was no, business plan. There was no, looking at revenue and, making smart decisions. It was like, whatever happens, happens. It was the wild, wild west. So, yeah, underdog. We chips on the shoulder for sure.
What was the big lesson and the big, after kind of the smoke had settled and the dust cleared, with all the back and forth of the brick and mortars, what was kind of your big takeaway, and what did you come out of that thinking about yourself and your business?
My big takeaway was I learned how government really works. You take that course as a senior, and you don't really know,
Yeah.
but I got to see up close and personal how that works, and it gave me hope in a weird sort of way, because in the end, I think they put something out there that allowed us young entrepreneurs to try. And I think that's really all you need that. I don't think government should be in the business of, stopping business or protecting business or helping business. It just let people sort of get out there and let the market decide. And I think the market did decide in a way that was positive for the city overall. And it was a sign of Buffalo being progressive at a time when we needed to be, which is great because it ran parallel with a lot of other awesome things that began happening in the city. The development, great articles being written about Buffalo and such.
Yeah, the timing seemed to be right of this kind of budding renaissance we've been seeing.
It was perfect.
And this, right?
Yeah, it was perfect.
So you've had, outside of that first year where, you're not sure if the lights are going to turn on at your apartment, but you've zooming out, you've kind of had steady growth year to year. You're up to 4 food trucks now, 2 restaurants, sauces and grocery stores, an ice cream brand, and now coffee. But then that's all within 10 years. That's pretty aggressive expansion, right?
Yeah, I mean, aggressive from the outside perspective. To me, we're not moving fast enough ever, but that's my own personal problem. I've had to learn to curb that because, we don't want the wheels to fall off the trucks, and I think that's where my partner really helps out a lot in terms of, he's very much in that mindset of processes, and I'm not at all. My brain doesn't work that way. I see that they're necessary and important for certain things, but I just want to go. And I think that it's because I look at where we're at now, knowing that we could be further along and that we will be further along, and it's just that impatience that I've had to work on as a business owner. So that's been my personal growth and my trying to become better is thinking about that stuff and not just expansion.
What is some of the challenges for the expansion been? Because it was probably a tough decision to all right, we need a second truck. Do we do this, or do we just have more routes and with one truck? What's been some of those challenges whenever you've had a key decision to make?
That decision was easy on whether or not we were going to build Dose, the second truck. It was super easy because I had already maxed out OG's schedule, and I was getting inbound requests that I couldn't even answer, on a daily basis. So I knew that even just from touching and developing some more relationships, that we could easily fill another truck schedule. So we did a Kickstarter, which was controversial, and gave birth to Dose, along with help from the bank. So that was an easy one, but the decisions after that, each one became harder and harder, because at one point we had to decide, is this going to be a 10 food truck business, which I originally thought it could be, or are we going to get involved in the restaurant bar business, which I swore I would never do.
Sure.
Because I loved that, the math mind was like, hey, great part about a truck is we get to take it to the crowds. We're not, reliant on our location alone for our success point.
And neighborhoods come and go. I mean,
we're talking about serious investments, and with things changing rapidly in the city, you've got to make some guesses and hope that they work out if you're going to plant your flag somewhere. And luckily, we ended up doing that on Hurdle, but we could talk about that a little bit later. So that the decision to pivot really, we found, and I was wrong, that coupling the two operations together, we could be even more efficient than just having the trucks. So that worked out for us. But somewhere between 3 and 4, we made a decision, Chris and myself, that we will open some sort of brick and mortar. And then we use that next year and a half to kind of evolve the concept and do some research, travel to some other cities, pick the things that we liked and discard the things that we didn't like. And we thought that fast casual paired with a craft cocktail bar was something, because we're into things that people don't do, to test them and to find opportunity. We really, like, on one hand, I could count the number of establishments that were using that model. So we thought that we could make huge strides in terms of like overhead and improvements on the existing hamster wheel, and it worked.
So you open up that first location on Hurdle, the sort of Willy Wonka of tacos concept. That wasn't the original location, though, and I know you just alluded to that. We talked about, big investment, big capital investment in a neighborhood. Obviously a tough decision to either go with an Allentown, an Elmwood, a Hurdle. How did you guys narrow down Hurdle, and what was kind of the process behind that?
Yeah, definitely. I'll touch on Hurdle in a second, but what I should say I didn't answer previously was the reason why we didn't go with the 10 truck operation is just simply because we're in Buffalo. Yeah. And, even though I saw that in LA and parts of Texas and other developed food truck cultures, the one thing that they had on their side was the weather. They're basically a year-round business. And we were one of the few trucks that stayed open during the winter, but the winter is brutal. Yeah.
I admittedly stood in line in February for that truck, and it can be rough sometimes.
Yeah, and those are my favorite people.
Yeah.
I mean, but we just didn't want to look like chumps because, hey, if you're willing to stay outside, in December in a football game, we're gonna be out there with you, and we're gonna show that we could sell a taco during that time.
And as you mentioned,
it's not smart business,
right?
But there was enough where we had padding from the summer to keep our great people on to push us through spring.
And as you mentioned, most of the food trucks, October, November, they pack up for the winter and see you in spring.
Yeah, it's a Halloween decision or it's a Thanksgiving decision, and it's still that way. Out of the 50-ish trucks we have, I mean, there's maybe 5 that do it like we do it. This year we did something different. We shut down one of the trucks for the winter, and I think that was a good move, good experiment. But yeah, getting back to Hurdle, I thought Hurdle was like the thing. I thought that was going to be the next spot, but I also had my sights set on Elmwood. Yeah. So we actually simultaneously, within like 3 months, we ended up leasing 2 spaces because our intent was to eventually open on Elmwood. And I could talk, at some point at length. You'll probably have to kick me out of here about what happened on Elmwood. But Hurdle was, I just, I grew up near there, and I never really could understand why the commercial strip wasn't more developed. It never matched the residential population, I mean, there's a perception that North Buffalo is, it's safer, it's more inviting, there's more parking. Like, all these things lend themselves to a restaurant. And the other thing that we really liked about it was its access and quick hop from the North Towns, where we were doing serious business.
Yeah.
So we thought it was the best of both worlds. We're in the city, suburbs can come to, and that's why we went with Hurdle. The price was right at that time. I mean, this was like 3 years ago. We leased a year and a half, probably like 16 months-ish before we opened, 15 months before we opened. And we actually rushed to lease because we knew we were going on the show. And because we were going to be on Restaurant Startup, we felt our case would be stronger if we already had decisions made around potential locations. So I was just like, hey, well, if they don't like Hurdle, then they'll like Elmwood. But if they don't like Elmwood, then they'll like Hurdle. I figured we could win no matter what.
And you ended up going on that show, winning, and then ultimately deciding not to go through, right?
Yeah. And that was a big boy decision. I think that was the day that I had to.
I'm a businessman now.
Yeah, for real. And because I want that whole sexiness of working with people who are awesome. I mean, it's the equivalent of like LeBron James saying, "This is the sneaker I'm going to wear." Having that association with Tim Love and Joe Bastianich would have put us miles ahead, but it would have come at serious financial sacrifice. So, yeah, would we be farther along today? Yeah, of course we would. And would we be in multiple cities today? Yeah, of course we would. But relinquishing ownership and decision-making would have been tough, I think, early on, not knowing what the success of the factory could or couldn't be.
Sure.
And that original deal, that original handshake included the truck business and the catering business as well. And it wasn't something like we didn't say no the day after. We ended up courting each other over a 2-month period where we met with them multiple times and went out to New York and just couldn't get on the same page. We got the deal better, actually. We got it a little bit sweeter, which was great for my partner. But we couldn't get on the same page about philosophy and service style. And, they wanted us to focus on wines and like servers, and that's not us. Like, we got to bring the truck inside, and we need to do it in an informal way.
Your customer base is used to just grabbing their food and going to a park or to a bench or whatever the case may be. Similar situation at the factory where grab a quick table, you're in and out in 10 minutes and call it a day.
Exactly. So that was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make in my entire life.
When I look back at what Lloyd has been able to do, the social media aspect is huge and shouldn't go unnoticed. One of the more popular social media networks in Western New York, and you really capitalized early on when nobody knew how to capitalize on social media. Why was social media such a vital component of Lloyd early on and even today?
Yeah, two things. I mean, I'll talk more about the broader social network and how that relates to food trucks, I think, first. But even before that, it was really foreign to me because at that time, I was like the anti-Facebook, and I didn't participate, and I didn't have any personal pages or anything. And Nick literally had to show me how to set up a Facebook page so that I could become an admin and create the Lloyd page. And that account still sits like dormant.
Yeah.
But the greater food truck movement really doesn't happen without social. Roy Choi wouldn't have been able to do what he did without Twitter and Facebook. And I tell everyone it's this perfect storm of people using this medium and trucks, doing their thing, because the truck business is so dynamic. You can't rely on traditional print or any sort of other ads to get the message out about what you're doing and where you're going. You need real-time stuff.
Yeah, the allure of it is we're going to be here. And if you saw that, and it's like a secret club almost. Like, I know where Lloyd's going to be today. It's great.
And now you create this sense of anticipation and like, that I think makes people want it even more. and the hunt, right? I think that there's something exciting about opening it up and finding out where they're going to be, especially when the choices were limited. It's like, oh, are they going to be by my work today? Or, hey, can I hop over there? But learning to work social, and I mean, it was interesting. It was a challenge for sure, but I found how important it was as a communication mechanism with your customers. Mm-hmm. That feedback as an early entrepreneur, any new business, is priceless. You are modifying on the fly. You're trying to find what works, and to be able to connect like that with your customers and through messaging and seeing what people are posting. I would just sit and spend my entire night just trying to digest everything that people were saying. And that was like our barometer of success.
And I think one of the things that's interesting about, just the Lloyd brand and everything you guys do is the personality behind it. It's not just we're going to be here, see you there. It's like you're interacting with your customers.
Yeah, that's not fun. A bank would post that.
Exactly. You're interacting with your customers. You have the personality. You're making jokes. You're involved. And is that again a happy accident, or just like, is that your personality just reflected on social media?
All I think happened was because I was the one with the phone trying to figure out how to drive around town and do this thing, that somehow I got to, whether through my personality or not, to invent Lloyd and what his personality. Maybe it was what I wanted my personality to be, and that's why it was so fun to do and live vicariously through it. But once I didn't know much about brands, because the other things that I had done weren't really brand-driven things. Maybe one of them was, but learning about brands and realizing how important it was, I think that helped me when I was messaging, but it wasn't anything that came right away. It was something a little bit later when I was like, oh man, I better learn about brands. Mm-hmm. I think in the beginning it was just very genuine and very natural. We were just being ourselves, tweeting dumb things because we're dumb.
I know the listeners want probably the backstory of the Lloyd name and the Where's Lloyd handle. I don't, though, because I love the allure.
Great, let's leave it.
I love, and for me, it's very similar to Top Gear and the Stig, where it's like you don't know who he is and like his backstory, and it's fantastic. So I'm not going to. I might lose some subscribers. I don't care. But what I do want to ask,
I appreciate that.
Is what's next? For Lloyd and Churn and now Coffee. And what's kind of some parting advice you have for some entrepreneurs who are interested in maybe making a jump similar to what you did, almost 10 years ago?
Well, I don't know what the first part of the question was.
What's next?
Let's take it. Can we break it into
we can break it into a couple
focus,
things.
So let's, okay. Two things. What's next? I think easily, safely, we're gonna open another factory. We're gonna open another taco factory. And where that's going to be, I couldn't tell you. I'm probably Elmwood-ish, more southern part of Elmwood, I think, or downtown, and then potentially eventually a Southtown spot. Okay. But I think when we figure out where that next one's going to be, we're gonna hit a revenue number where I swore up and down, if and when we hit, that I was going to go on sabbatical. And I'm taking that decision very seriously, so much that I want to go on sabbatical like now, before it happens, because I want to make sure that coming back from that, I still love it as much as I do. Because I think that's really important, because if you don't have that passion, you don't have that drive, like everything has a life cycle. And some people tell me it's 6 years. Some people who are smarter say it's 12 years. Anyway, I'm at 8 in July. So I'm getting into that zone where I want to make sure that if I'm going to stick it out, and I have to say, like, I'm the guy, or I have to grow to be the guy that's going to take it from this point to the next point. And that next point means other cities. It means sticking through to see the next revenue number.
Are people knocking at the door to bring Lloyd to Rochester, Syracuse, whatever?
We do have people contacting us on a regular basis, trying to figure out how to make a deal work. I'm entertaining some of them, but mostly I'm staying away from it because this year has been about focusing internally on those processes, on those training methods, on the what is the secret sauce of Lloyd. And, first of all, like we need to make sure that the Dirty South at Williamsville tastes like the Dirty South at Hurdle. Mm-hmm. And it does, right? So that test already happened. So far, so good. And now we're thinking we're good. We feel confident about number 3 and beyond. Mm-hmm. But in order to do anything like at scale, now I can't drive 15, 20 minutes and hop over to the restaurant and solve a problem. Now it's
you gotta spend
an hour and a half away,
yeah.
or it's 3 hours to Cleveland, or it's 4 hours to Pittsburgh. That's, I think, the true test. And I want to do that test sooner rather than later while we have this energy and while we have this momentum. Back to the sabbatical, because I think that maybe this is advice for entrepreneurs. You hear it said all the time that eventually, the entrepreneur can't run the business, and I'm the entrepreneur here. So I worry that, maybe I'm not the right person for it. And if I'm all for the growth and stuff, but if I'm not, I have to be honest, because I have a duty to the company, and there's nothing wrong with hiring someone who has those skill sets, and more importantly, has done it. Sure. So if I'm hunting for the future CEO of Lloyd, it's going to be someone who has worked at Shake Shack in the exec, office, or who has worked at a brand company like New Era and knows that inside and out. Because at the end of the day, like, this is food, but like Lloyd is a bit lifestyle driven, and we got to recruit up, if we're going to do that, and it's not going to be us.
So, in terms of a qualification standpoint, my experience just eating there on the regular weekly basis doesn't make me qualified for CA. I just want to set my expectations.
Maybe I don't know. It would be fun.
In wrapping this up, what I really just need to know is how much more money do I need to spend before I have a special named after me? Because it's something I'm sure.
Are you part of the royalty program?
I am.
Okay.
Of course.
All right. Great.
Of course. Come on.
And then just maybe some advice for entrepreneurs is I would say, like, you have to just be true to yourself, and trying to be something you're not is only going to get you into trouble. I'm not saying you can't improve. You should always be working on yourself. That's your number one asset as an entrepreneur. How well can you sell? How well can you, because everything's about people, right? You have to convince people that your idea is worthwhile, whether it's someone you're pitching to or your customer. You better be able to communicate that clearly, effectively, concisely. So you should always work on yourself. That's number one. But I think being true to yourself, there's something special about that in a world where things are becoming very like cookie cutter and very stale and very sterile. I think businesses that stay true to their roots will find success in the near future. And then the last thing would just be to freaking go for it. Just go for it, because what happens if you fall flat on your ass? It doesn't matter. You can just pick yourself back up and go to your 9-to-5 or find a different one. Like, the trade-off really isn't anything that people should be worried about. And I think do it while you can.
All right, Pete, I don't think anyone listening who doesn't already follow Lloyd, but if people want to learn more about Lloyd, Taco Factory and Churn and everything else you're doing, how can they do so?
So they can follow us at Where's Lloyd on all of our, Where's Lloyd, Lloyd Taco Trucks, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and those are the two handles, and then Churn Soft Serve. And I didn't talk at all about Churn, but Churn's pretty
we'll have
fun.
You back on the podcast and talk about. But for the meantime,
special.
Head over to Churn, which is right next to the Taco Factory on Hurdle, and enjoy yourself a nice cone.
Oh, Tiki and Tacos.
Yes.
Come to Tiki and Tacos.
What is Tiki and Tacos?
It's going to be a wild event. We're having Danny Dispo of Buffalo Proper do his secret Veiled Pearl bar pop-up, and he is doing some really awesome Polynesian-style drinks. Okay. And we're pairing that with Chef Chris's Food, my partner, who did his culinary school in Hawaii. Okay. We have a limited number of tickets for sale. They're $45 a pop. That includes all 3 fancy schmancy cocktails and pretty much all you can eat of whatever Chris decides he wants to make. And that event is happening on June 10th, which is a Sunday, from 6 to 10 p.m. at our Williamsville location.
Okay.
So come check it out. Tickets are on Eventbrite.
Fantastic. We'll post the link in the show notes and online as well. Pete, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch up with you down the road.
Appreciate the time. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers. I want to thank Peter for joining me on the podcast once again this week. Make sure you're following all the latest updates of Lloyd's Taco Truck and Factory, and also Churn on social media. They've got some great stuff coming up this summer. And if you're in a giving mood, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review of this show. It can be 5 stars, can be 4, but really anything under than that. If it's really that bad, don't leave a review. But if you'd like to give a 4 or 5-star review, preferably a 5-star review, head on over to Apple Podcasts and let us know your feedback. And as always, you can email me, podcast@43north.org, for your show ideas. If you want to be on this show, feel free to email me. Or if you want somebody specifically on this show, feel free to email me or hit me up on social media at 43north or at Nate Benson. That's where you can usually find me. We've got a pretty deep library of episodes in our archive, so head on over to Apple Podcasts or, again, Podbean, Google Play, Stitcher Radio. Scroll through and just, randomly select an episode. You'll never know what you might learn on the Latitude podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you so much for sharing. And for 43 North, I'm Nate Benson, and we'll see you at the next one.